Right, guys, welcome back to 6th Key Knowledge dot point in this third outcome of Unit 3. In this video, we are looking at quality strategies. So we started with technology strategies, then we covered material strategies. Now we're moving on to the third of the fourth set of strategies, this being quality. So here's our study design, and here is where we're at. Again, strategies to improve both the efficiency and the effectiveness of operations, same as the previous two, but this time related to quality, including, and it gives us 3 quality management strategies that we can use here. So these are those strategies. That's just pulled straight from that previous study design there. So quality control, quality assurance, and total quality management. Now, one thing I'm just going to point out right up the front is that we will do them in that order. So QC, QA, TQM. And basically, as we move through each strategy, they become kind of more complex, more involved. So QC is a very basic strategy. QA takes things a little bit further, and TQM really takes things to the kind of the far extreme of managing quality in a business. And also to point out here that as we move through, each of them includes the previous, okay? So if you're doing QA in your business, that means you're also doing QC. If you're doing TQM, it means you're doing both QC and QA, okay? So they become more complex as we move through, and that will become very apparent. And each of them, or each subsequent one, includes the previous ones. Very important to remember. Before we get into those strategies, though, I guess the first question is, what do we even mean by quality? I mean, I think you probably have some kind of an idea, but just put some kind of rigor around that. So to define quality, the degree of excellence in products and their ability to satisfy client or customer requirements. So that's a definition of what we mean by quality. Now, the reality is that customers usually base their purchasing decisions on quality, or quality and price, kind of a combination. So in other words, what customers are looking for is to get the best quality that they possibly can for the lowest possible price. So quality is one of the things that businesses compete on, which makes it really, really important. No business can just ignore quality. So, put that another way, quality management is one way in which businesses can enhance their competitiveness in the market. Okay, businesses all compete on quality. Doesn't mean as a business you have to have the highest quality products or services in your market, but what it does mean is that the quality must be reflected in the price, which is why it's kind of a combination. Okay, factors that might determine quality, and this is going to change absolutely for any product or service. So this is not the same for every product and service, but these are some examples of things that a customer might include in their mind when they're thinking about the quality of a certain product or service. So durability, aesthetics, design, consistency, features, ease of use, so on and so forth. That's not a complete list, but there's a whole bunch of examples, and that clearly makes sense. So some of those will apply to some products, but not all products. Okay, so it depends on what we're actually talking about. So look, as an example, okay, so there we see 2 cars, okay. If you are not into your cars, this probably won't mean much, but they're both SUVs, both a similar size. I think the top one might be slightly larger, but at the end of the day, they both, they fill the same job, they serve the same function. They carry, someone in their family from point A to point B. So functionally, they do the same thing. Now, that top one is a Rolls-Royce Cullinan, which in 2023 will cost you in the region of $700,000 plus, depending on how you option it up. You can get towards $1 million pretty easily with that thing, I think. And the bottom one is a Kia Sorento, $65,000. Now, I guess what's interesting here, both of these are seen to be quality products. Okay, the fact that the Rolls-Royce costs 10 times as much doesn't mean that it's 10 times the quality. in its market, the Kia Sorento, so I guess SUVs costing around that kind of price, Kia Sorento is deemed to be one of the highest quality products that you can buy. Okay. And again, going back to that list of factors or elements that, what do we mean by quality? You could go back reliability, for example. Reliability is a really key thing with cars. And what's interesting here actually is in reliability surveys of owners of these cars around the world, the Kia Sorento actually tends to come ahead of the Rolls-Royce in terms of how reliable it is. People end up having more faults with the Roller than with the Kia, even though it costs 10 times as much. So like I say, quality is relative to price. Both quality products, both priced very differently. Now, getting back to those three strategies. So just a reminder, we start with QC, we start with QA, move on to TQM. I'll put it like this because, like I say, QC is quite a small strategy. It's fairly basic. It's quite a narrow focus. QA broadens the focus up a bit, and then TQM, as we'll see, has a much, much broader focus and is a much more complex and involved strategy. And again, as you move up that pyramid there, that inverted pyramid, each of them includes the ones below it, okay? Just to remind you of that. So let's get into the strategies. So first off, quality control, QC. To define it in a sentence, a process of checking the quality of standards of work done or the quality of raw materials or component parts. Okay, so just a one sentence definition there. So what does this involve? Basically, this is just carrying out physical checks at different stages of production. Okay, so at different stages of production, you actually go in and physically check what's going on. And then again at the end of production, so with your finished product, just to make sure that your products, also could apply to services, meet the required standards. Okay, at any point in that process, any unsatisfactory products are discarded, and then the error that caused that unsatisfactory product is then eliminated. Okay, so literally physically going in and taking product at various stages of production, making sure that it meets the standards that you're trying to meet. If it doesn't, throw it away and then fix the issue. Okay, so if you think about that, it's a reactive system. Really, really important to remember this and use that word in your description of quality control. It's reactive. Okay, errors are happening, but then what we do, we detect the error and then eliminate the error after it occurs. Okay, and when we talk about QA, to put that in context, that will make even more sense. Okay, so it's really important that you note that it's a reactive system. Okay, the other thing to note, of course, is you're not generally inspecting every single product, but a sample from each batch. Okay, you can't inspect every product, especially again if you go back to your Colt, the number of products that are coming off that line, you can't inspect all of them. We actually did see people taking off random ones and looking at them, and she explained that process, looking at making sure for example, the print on each bottle is right. Because if the print's fading, then you'll chuck away those ones, and then you'll go back and I'm assuming, refill the ink. I mean, this is really simplifying it, but refill the ink to make sure that the ones coming out after, again, the bottles are being printed properly and that sort of thing. Okay, now if you catch these things too late and we end up with defective products or products that don't meet your quality standards actually ending up with the customer or on supermarket shelves, shop shelves, so on and so forth. So at a point where customers can buy them, then that can lead to a product recall. This is something you really, really don't want to happen. This is why we have these quality control checks, to avoid that happening. Okay, so a product recall, look, it's not mentioned specifically in the study design, but it's worth being aware of at least. And maybe you might be able to use this in a description depending on a question, but just to give you some idea of what we mean by product recall. Okay, look, this is just an article. Look, you can see that I've circled April 30th, 2020. So this is a bit of an old article now. But just at that point, the article was based on the 10 most famous product recalls of the last 5 years, obviously 2015 to 2020. It's not current, but it doesn't matter because you're not going to use these specifically. You're not going to mention these actual product recalls. It's just to give you an idea. Okay, so Takata Airbags. Takata is a business that creates or builds airbags for, I think, most brands of cars. Okay, and this was a huge one in the press because there were dodgy airbags. Airbags were going off at the wrong time or not going off. There was a big issue with airbags and it could have been really dangerous. So lots and lots of cars around the world were recalled. So I had to go back to the dealer to have that issue fixed. Needles in strawberries. You might remember this one. Don't know, you might be a bit young, but this was someone had actually intentionally put some needles in strawberries. It says in there, but a disgruntled ex-employee of a farm, and these things had actually ended up on the shelves, and I think a customer bought one, noticed it, and then had to recall all these strawberries. I think at first they weren't sure how widespread it was. They kind of recalled all of them and then narrowed it down to this one particular farm. But you can see it affected 68 strawberry brands, 49 in Queens, but 68 strawberry brands because each farm obviously supplies to different businesses. So that was a pretty key one. Salmonella in eggs, another example there. Again, a real health hazard. I don't know if you remember this one, but the Samsung Galaxy 7 Note battery overheating issue. These things were suddenly lying there. If they were charging, they would just catch fire. That's really not ideal. These are just a few I've actually done so I'm recording this in May of 2023, that these are just a couple that hit the media, hit the press over the last month or so. Jeeps recalled, not sure what the reason was, but that was in the article. Wooden baby rattles, and gluten-free Ozemite, I don't know how you say that even, Ozemite spread found to contain gluten. So again, these are some recent examples. Now, what you actually can do, there is a government website, productsafety.gov.au. That's if you go into that, that's kind of the front page, and it actually give you a list of all the current recalls that are happening in Australia. So if you actually hit the search function, you see this, and it basically lists all of them, kind of going back, and you can see there's quite a lot there. This is only going back a period of a couple of weeks, and there's, I don't know what, 10 there or something. So the most recent one is that baby wooden rattle one, which I think was probably linked to the headline I just gave you before. Fluke Australia, digital multimeter, whatever that is, Kawasaki Motors, so on and so forth. There's LG TVs there, not sure what drama, but basically if you go in, click on those links, it will tell you what the issue is and what you then need to do about it. And generally speaking, it's taking it back to the retailer for either to get it fixed or replaced or refunded or whatever, depending on what the product is. Now, obviously, we're not expected every week to go into this website and just check that everything we've bought, has a recall on it. The idea is, obviously, with bigger purchases, retailers generally have your details. So with cars and things, the dealer will have your details. So they would contact you. With really important like health ones, like foodstuffs that ends up in the supermarkets, that tends to hit the media. So it'll be on the news, it'll be in the newspapers to kind of hit as many people as possible. And they'll tell you, take the stuff back, don't eat it, so on and so forth. So really important ones, which could be dangerous to the health of a lot of people, will hit the media. But other than that, kind of relies on retailers or whoever you bought the product from in contacting customers, or you just kind of being aware. Okay, so product recall, obviously this is not a good look, can really damage your reputation, particularly if you have a lot of recalls over a period of time. So for example, Jeep as a car brand has a reputation of being really unreliable, and one of the reasons is that reasons for that reputation is that they have had more product recalls over the last 5 or 10 years than any other car brand. Okay, so clearly that hints at reliability issues. Okay, so just to be aware of what a product recall is, kind of the impact it can have on a business and why it's not a good thing, really. Okay, quality control, just finishing off this one now here, a process. And again, this is maybe if you, for whatever reason, need to score more marks from quality control, or if it asks you a process that a business can go through to implement quality control. So this is a process that you can learn that can be used. So we start off the top left box there. Basically what you're doing is you're establishing the benchmarks or the standards that you're trying to achieve. Okay, and again, this would apply maybe at each stage of the production process, not just necessarily with the end product. It depends on what we're talking about here. But whatever standards you're trying to achieve, obviously it makes sense that we know what they are, so that when we do stage 2, carrying out the inspections, we know what we're looking for. Okay, so we've established our benchmarks, we've established the standards. Step 2, we're carrying out these inspections to make sure that we are meeting those standards. Stage 3, you're comparing the results of your inspections with those standards. Those two kind of go hand in hand. And at that point, you're going to reject any product that fails to meet those standards. And then stage 4, you're going to correct those processes or procedures to prevent that particular defect occurring again. And at that stage, you might also reappraise your performance standards. You might, think we need to make these tighter or loosen them up or whatever. And this is a continuous process. So we set the standards, we inspect, we compare, and then we correct. Okay. So I've circled the words in there, just keywords you might use just to learn those and then build your answer around those. Okay, so pretty straightforward. Okay, impact on efficiency and effectiveness, because again, that is mentioned in the study design, so they can specifically and probably will ask you specifically about this. So impact on efficiency prevents errors from reoccurring, therefore less waste in production leading to increased efficiency. Fairly obvious. And also by fixing the errors, it reduces the chances of halts in production and therefore allowing the operations system to continue without interference or stoppages, which again is also going to help your efficiency. The reason I've highlighted in pink the there is because, again, coming back to this idea that this is reactive, okay, prevents errors from reoccurring. It doesn't necessarily prevent them from occurring in the first place, because remember, we're kind of picking up on the errors once it's happened and then going and fixing it. So make sure when you're using this, it's reoccurring, not occurring. And the impact on effectiveness, eliminating errors reduces the chances of customers actually receiving faulty products. That's going to help meet customer satisfaction targets, increase sales, and therefore profitability, shareholder expectations, and all that sort of things. Remember, effectiveness is all about your ability to achieve your objectives. Okay, so I think a fairly straightforward one there. Now I'm just going to look at these also as they relate to Yakult. Okay, now Yakult has a lot of really good stuff on their website. And again, for the SAC, be digging around in the website to help bolster those answers for that revision document that we provided you with. Okay, you're not going to be able to answer everything in that document from what we observed and what you wrote down on the tour, but the website has a lot of good stuff. Some of this stuff we actually did see in action on the tour, but not all of this for sure. So this is an example. So QC. So you can read through that and take some notes out of that. But QC activities involve sampling, testing, inspecting the product, the bottles and the packaging, confirming that the QA, and we'll get onto that in a minute, measures have been effective. Individual bottles randomly expected. Now we saw that, or certainly my group saw that. So there were people, as we saw those bottles whizzing past, they would take some random samples out. And again, they were looking for the printing, the lid seals and that sort of thing. Raw ingredient samples, and then actually the end product. Again, we saw that. There was that quality control lab. There were 2 or 3 people in there and they were doing lots of tests on the product. And she did say there were lots of tests, and it says there are 200 different tests they do on the product to make sure it is fit for purpose, it's safe, and it meets the standards they're trying to achieve before it leaves your cult and ends up on supermarket shelves. And so on and so forth there. Okay, so there's a couple of examples of the tests. You don't need to get into that level of detail, but just be aware, they perform lots of tests as a quality control before the stuff leaves the site. Okay, so that's QC in action at Yakult. Okay, the second strategy, quality assurance. Okay, a system established to ensure that predetermined quality standards are achieved. Okay, so that's your snapshot 1-sentence definition. Now, there's a couple of elements. It's generally not pitched this way in textbooks or anything, but I just tend to think in terms of when your mind, just think there's 2 elements to this so that you kind of cover both. Okay, the first important point is that QA unlike QC, is now aiming to build quality into the work processes, thereby avoiding errors before they occur. Okay, so therefore, unlike QC, this now becomes a proactive system. And again, in a minute, we'll look at how Yakult implements QA, and there'll be some examples in there that will show you that kind of demonstrates how that works, some examples of how you can be proactive as opposed to waiting for errors to happen, like with QC. This one, you're trying to avoid the errors happening right off the bat. Okay. The second aspect of QA is the use of an external certification body. Now, she actually did mention this, our tour guide did mention this on the tour. So yeah, the second part of this, getting your product and your processes certified by an external certification body. Okay. So expanding on that point there, okay, certification bodies basically compare your standards against their published standards. And they could be national, they could be global, depends on what we're talking about. And if you meet their standards, you then get to display their quality or their certification mark, okay? SAI Global is the main Australian certification body that issues certification against published ISO standards. I'll say that in a second. And kind of the point of this is, and again, our tour guide did mention this, this is basically you as a business saying to the world, you know, we're not just set our own quality standards and meeting those. We're actually meeting the standards of this external body, national, global, whatever it is. This is another external body. It's like the quality police, if you like. They have inspected what we do and they are saying we meet their standards. Much, much more powerful than just a business setting their own standards and meeting them. Because you're saying, you know, the quality police have said we're all good. I wouldn't use that terminology in an answer, definitely not, but hopefully that kind of helps you understand what I mean. ISO 9001. So this is just some examples of quality marks. You might actually have seen these, okay? ISO and then 4 numbers generally. So there's some examples. ISO 9001, ISO 14001, which is more focused on in the environment. So if your environmental standards, and then you might get ISO 45001 if you meet the standards around OH&S. Okay, so there's loads and loads of different ones, and you know, businesses will have different ones or try to meet different ones depending on what their business is. The main one though is ISO 9001. Okay, so this is the international standards. This is an international standard. This is just Australian for creating a quality management system. So this kind of looks at not just one aspect or a couple of aspects of quality. This looks at your entire approach to quality. So this is kind of like an overarching ISO. So this is the main one that businesses tried to get, ISO 9001. And those other ones, like the examples we just saw, they're kind of like to back it up and they look at specific aspects of the operation. But this really is the overall quality. So this is basically ISO to certify that, you know, your quality in all areas is meeting the standards. Okay, so there's third-party certification bodies that go out into businesses, checking that businesses that want this accreditation, this certification, meet those standards. And if they do, then they get to display the ISO 9001 quality mark. There's now over 1 million businesses worldwide that have been independently certified to meet that standard. Okay. And then, like I said, further standards, we just saw 2 before. ISO now 9002 is about QA in production and installation. 9003 is about final inspection and test. But really, 9001 is the key one that you need to recognize and understand what that's about. So it's kind of looking at a holistic approach to quality. Okay. Now, I just touched on this previously, but being able to display that quality mark gives confidence to all of the organization stakeholders, your customers, your investors, suppliers, kind of everyone else dealing with it. Because like I said, it's an external body saying to the world, we're quality, not just you saying we're quality. It's these certified bodies saying to the world, this is a business that operates with quality. Also helps in selling in overseas markets because this is an internationally recognized standard, and the standards would be consistent around the world. So if you are buying supplies, for example, from an overseas supplier, you can have a degree of confidence over the quality of that business, their operation, and their products if they have the ISO 9001 quality mark. And of course, this is all comparison. Really, what you're doing, can gives you some competitiveness over non-certified competitors. So if you had a choice as a customer of buying from a business which has ISO 9001 and another that doesn't, all other things being equal, if the product was kind of similar, the price was similar, and all the other, aspects on which you might purchase a product or a service are similar. If one has the 9001 mark and one doesn't, well, then you'd probably go with the one that does, because it just gives you that kind of extra confidence in what they do. Okay, so QA, impact on efficiency, preventing errors before they occur, reduces the number of faulty products produced, therefore reducing waste, thereby increasing efficiency. Halts production, again, also minimized because of the errors being found early, therefore also increasing efficiency. So very, very similar to the impacts on efficiency for QC, but just kind of taking it that step further because we're finding the faults before they actually occur. And again, impact and effectiveness, really similar. Less chance of faulty products going out to market, thereby increasing customer satisfaction, therefore sales and profitability. But also an added dimension here, which we didn't get from QC. Customers are more likely to buy a good or a service with the certified standard of quality. And that again helps meet the objective of increasing sales. Okay, so very similar, but that last sentence there, kind of an add-on, something you don't get or a benefit you don't get from QC. And again, just bringing this back to your cult. Okay, so QA measures maintain excellence in. Now, if you look at those things there, personnel and factory hygiene standards, equipment cleaning process methods, product handling, blah, blah, blah. That's what I'm talking about being proactive. So if you think about it, those are proactive approaches. If you maintain really high hygiene standards, you think about it, when we looked at the factory floor, it looked super clean, yeah, super, super clean. If we make sure all of our equipment is being cleaned properly, if all of our processing methods are bang on, if we're handling products the right way, if we're purchasing raw materials the right way and then storing them, if we're training all of our staff in the right way around hygiene and all that, think about all those things. If we're doing those things, it minimizes the risk of errors with the product occurring, okay, particularly that might be associated with hygiene and cleanliness. So that's what I mean by being proactive, okay? They are proactive strategies which the business can take, which is minimizing the risk of problems occurring further down the track, okay? Also talks about some other stuff there, but it also mentions the quality management system. So the QMS is a term used in businesses for their overall quality management system. And it mentions the ISO 9001 that your cult complies with there. And it tells you what it covers, so manufacturing, selling, distribution, so on and so forth. So, yeah, so your cult has the ISO 9001 certification, kind of as you'd expect. Most businesses these days, particularly big businesses with very, very popular products, they kind of all have this. Okay, so there is your QA. Hopefully that makes sense, and you can see how that's extended on QC. Now the third one, so this is the most involved and most complex one. TQM, Total Quality Management. Okay, now there is your snapshot, one sentence description of it or definition of it. Now it's a longer description because it's a more involved strategy. Okay, a holistic approach, really, really good word to use, a holistic approach, where all members of an organization participate in ongoing improvement in organizational culture and production processes. Integrated management-led effort aimed at improving performance at every level and in every area of the organization. So just some key points to take out of that. Okay, holistic approach. And it says all members of organization. It says improving performance at every level and in every area. So this QM strategy, this approach to quality, now for the first time involves everybody in the business. Okay. QC definitely is really just about operations. Okay. QA really is focused on operations, but it can extend a little bit further into some other areas of the business and some of the other processes that you go through in terms of those certification standards. There might be some quality certification you can get around other processes outside of operations, but really still the focus is on operations. TQM, operations, but also everybody else in the business. So if I just quickly take us back to your cult, okay, when we were there, that sites that we went to, they said there were 35 people employed in the operations, so the factory floor that we saw, and then about another 35 people involved in the head office. Okay, so your accountants, your HR, marketing, so on and so forth. So if we're looking at QC, definitely that's just the operations people. Okay, that's just the factory. QA is largely going to be that as well, but there might be, like I said, some certification around a couple of other areas of the business as well. But TQM definitely applies now, and everybody is involved, whatever their job is. So everybody in the business is involved in TQM, okay, which is why it says all members of organization, every level, every area, okay. And again, there'll be aspects of that kind of drawn out as we talk through these three core principles. So this is the key with TQM, okay, based on three core principles. Now, if you look at the different textbooks for VCE Bizman, they might not all say there's three. If you Googled the principles of TQM, some are going to say there's 5, some are going to say, some are going to say there's 10. Again, this is one of those things that there is no hard and fast. But if you talked about these three core principles, you'd be safe for our purposes. And actually, when you see some of the lists which include more than 3, kind of a couple of them kind of fit under one of these umbrellas anyway. So let's just focus on 3 core principles and you would be all good. Okay. Continuous improvement, customer focus, and universal involvement and responsibility. So let's take those in turn. What do we mean by continuous improvement? Very simply, perfection doesn't exist. Okay. There is always room to improve. Even if it's in tiny, tiny incremental steps, there's still the ability to improve. We can never reach perfection. We can never be perfect. If you are 99.9% of there, that's not 100. Okay, then we're going to work towards 99.91. Then when we're there, 99.92, and then 99.93, and so on and so forth. You're never going to reach perfection, but we are continuously striving for it. So it's important to point out that this is a never-ending process, okay? We recognize that we are never going to be perfect, but we are constantly trying to get as close to perfection as we possibly can, okay? First principle of TQM. Second one, and this is the one which causes issues, and people write about this one in such a way which indicates they don't understand what we mean by a customer. And that's really what this is all focused on, because customer in this context of customer focus in TQM does not necessarily mean the customer of the business. Okay. So the first point to make, everybody in the business has a customer. Okay. Everybody. That customer might be external or internal. Now, external customer, that is the customer that you already understand. It's the person that ultimately buys the product, okay? The customer of the business. That's what we mean by an external customer, okay? Actually, there might actually be others as well. Suppliers could also be included in external to the business, but let's keep this simple. Largely speaking, the external customer is the person that buys, the consumer that ultimately buys your product or service. Where the descriptions in answers go wrong is because we also have an internal customer. Okay. Actually, just before we get there, just point out that second sentence there. The whole point of TQM is that everybody in the business is constantly working towards achieving the best outcome for their customer. Okay. Whether your customer is the external ultimate consumer of the product, or whether it is one of these internal customers that we're going to talk about. Some people have both. Okay. And I'll give you an example of that as well. But the point is, everybody in the business is doing the best that they possibly can for their customer. Now, coming back to this idea that there's two types of customers, internal customers. So just to define an internal customer, they're people within your business who receive goods or services from another person within your business. Okay. So anyone who works within the company or stakeholders that interact with people inside the business as part of their responsibility. So let me try and explain this using some examples so it makes some sense. For example, if you work in human resources in a business, if you're the HR manager, or if you're, one of the people in the HR team, you very rarely, if ever, probably never, will have any contact with the ultimate customer of the business. Okay, that's not your job. Okay, your job is to look after the people within the business. Remember, managing the employee-employee relationship is basically what they're there to do. So you're there to look after the people in the business. Also, part of your responsibility might be to provide HR advice to managers in the business in how best they can manage their people, how they can motivate them, how they can train them, all of those things we looked at in the last outcome. So if you're working in HR in a business, your customers are the employees within the business and also potentially the managers within the business who might come to you for advice. So coming back to this idea that everybody must work towards achieving the best outcome for their customer, HR, although they have nothing to do, no interaction with the ultimate customer of the product, of the business, if they're doing the best job that they can for their customers, i.e. the employees, then you're going to have happier employees. And we know that happier employees produce better work. They're absent from work less. They're going to stay with the business and all of that good stuff that leads to. Okay. Accountants, certain finance people. So you have certain people working in the finance team within a business whose job is to report on financial data and then report back to managers within the business to help them manage their part of the business. What I actually did when I started my working life, part qualifying as an accountant for BP, the oil company, I was what's called a management accountant. So I was producing management information each month and going out and having meetings with all the different managers in the business, presenting them with this financial information, which gave them information about what their area had been doing and then budgeting moving forward and kind of offering some financial advice about how they could best manage their business or their part of the business moving forward. So my customers there were managers within the business. Again, I never ever dealt with or had any interaction with BP's customers. My customers were all internal. You can have, actually going back to cleaning, even the cleaners. So take the cleaners at the school, okay? You could question maybe the quality at the moment, but theoretically we now have a team of cleaners that come into the school every day. They come in the morning and after school. Who's their customer? Okay, so you could say the external, because at the end of the day, if in a school context, students and parents are kind of the customer. So you guys fit in as the actual customer. So they're certainly there to serve you, but also the staff. The staff. Think about this. So if a staff member comes in the morning and their office is just an absolute mess and it's not being cleaned properly, that can just have a negative impact on the mindset of that teacher, that employee. Okay, that's not the best way to start the day, and that just might put them in a negative mindset, which then can carry through to their teaching. So it can actually impact on the actual quality of the service that's been delivered in the school. I know this kind of sounds a stretch, but there's some reality here. Just trying to give you some examples of how this works. So the idea is that if the cleaners do the best job that they can, and everybody comes in first thing to a really clean environment and everything's spick and span, everybody starts off, on a positive note, we can get on, and then that's part of that mindset that's going to help teachers deliver the best teaching that they can in the classroom, which is ultimately what a school is all about. I mentioned some people have internal and external customers. Just an example of that. I think Luby in the office at school, the bursar, she deals with students. She deals with parents, but also she deals with staff as well. So she has a range of internal and external customers. So just trying to really emphasize and really get you to understand what we mean by an internal customer, and this point that everybody in a business has a customer. But for a lot of people, it is not the customer in the context that until now you've thought of a customer as being. And if everybody does the best job for their customer, you kind of get this flow and effect, which ultimately is going to lead to the best quality product service being produced for the external customer. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. So when you're describing this, make sure you describe that accurately. Final one, again, like the first one, very simple. Universal involvement and responsibility. Okay. I said this at the beginning of TQM. Quality is responsibility of everybody in the organization. Go back to QC. That's really a production thing. QA is really focused on production as well, but it might touch on a couple of other areas. But absolutely, definitely, if you're doing TQM, everybody in the entire business is involved in TQM because everybody is committed to producing their best outcomes for their customers. And again, if everybody is doing this, everybody's doing the best job that they can do, there's more chance of the end product or service being of the highest quality possible. Okay, just one little thing to add in here. This can be encouraged through the use of quality circles. There's things called quality circles, which are just little teams that are put in place around the business. They can be groups of employees across different areas of the business. And the idea is to share ideas to improve quality. So you might meet once a month and you think about quality in your particular area and you share these ideas, and the idea that other parts of the business learn from parts of the business that are doing particularly well in this area. So sharing ideas, quality circles. So that's just one strategy that you can use to kind of implement this third principle of TQM. Again, impact on efficiency. Continuously improving the quality production system reduces the number of faulty products that go to waste, therefore including, this is much of a muchness. These things are really the same. Same impacts on effectiveness as before, but with the customer focus in mind, there's a higher chance of improving customer satisfaction and therefore increasing sales. Again, these, when we're talking about impact on efficiency and effectiveness for all of these, this is not the only answer, okay? There's lots of different ways of making that connection between QC, QA, TQM on efficiency and effectiveness. I'm kind of giving you one way in which to do it. But again, really, if you're doing this properly, you shouldn't need to learn these parts, okay? If you understand these principles, you then, if asked, you'd be able to make the connections yourself, and, you could all come up with different ways to do this, which could all be right. So this isn't stuff really that you should be needing to learn. If you understand this content sufficiently and in enough depth, and I don't think it's overly complex, you should be able to make the link how you get from one to the other. All right, summary of advantages and disadvantages. I'm not going to talk through this because I would have touched on pretty much all of this during this video. This is just summarized them in a nice little table for you. I'll just point out the first disadvantage you see there of QC, focus, limited production. What I'm talking about, what that means is what I was talking about, how QC is definitely just in operations. It's not other parts of the business. That's what that means. So I guess, look, when you are putting these into your notes, don't just copy them blindly. I'll come back to them later. Make sure that if you don't understand exactly what they mean, that you either dig into it further, go back and, look at other parts of the video or ask the teacher, because you need to have a good understanding of these. And again, think advantage and disadvantages, you tend to use these in a discuss question. And if you just put one disadvantage of QC is focus, limited production, that's not going to get you the mark. You need to expand on these when you're using them in answers. Okay, so this is like a real summary table. Don't just copy straight out of here and expect then to be able to use them as they are. Okay, this is meant to be a summary for you to use and then build upon. Okay, maybe a couple of those might be enough, but a lot of these you would need to expand on to actually use in a discuss question. So don't think you can just transfer these straight into an answer, because it's not always going to be the case. Okay. And if you're not understanding any of those, make sure you ask. So this is a really, really, when I talk about not just copying what you see on the screen in these videos, this is a really good example of that. Okay. So just finally summarizing each strategy in a snapshot, just recovering. Okay, QC, reactive system, where you find faults after they occur and then you deal with the issues that cause the faults. Okay, reactive, only operations. QA, proactive. Okay, try to avoid faults happening in the first place, and you also get that quality certification. Remember the two aspects, e.g. ISO 9001, that's the one to focus on. Again, focused on production or operations, might touch on other parts of the business. TQM, the first and only strategy that we look at. Holistic approach to quality. Culture improvement. There's a culture of everybody working to improve the quality of what they do, and based on those three core principles. Okay, so that is it for quality. Again, as always, any parts of that need further explanation, make sure you're asking your teacher. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video where we're going to be looking at waste minimization strategies. See you then. Cheers for now.